But I do think that now you're going to see a lot more right-wing people balancing out those scales. The fact is that you can take a knife to a gunfight all you want, and you can think that you're honorable, but you're going to end up being dead. And I think that's what right-wing people have done for a very long time. They've tried to speak above the political violence. They've tried to advocate above it and not try to stoop down to that level.
Well, I don't even know where to begin, guys. Donald Trump, 3 days ago, posted an AI like video meme of Nancy Pelosi or whatever, making fun of Paul Pelosi. I don't know where he gets this idea that Republicans have tried to be above all that. What are you talking about? You know, unfortunately, we do have to spend some time kind of addressing responses that I think are not good. How we engage and like how we talk about the responses that are not great, I think matters, but you know, we should look at it. So we're going to take a look at what Asmongold had to say.
Hey guys, it's me again, and it's been a little while. Just before I get into the main topic of the video, I want to explain why there haven't been any videos. My dad has been in the hospital for the better part of a week now. Very serious situation. It has required my full attention, and because of that, I've been on calls, I've been dealing with other people, talking to members of the family, and doing everything that I need to be there for my dad and for my family during this situation. And
his dad has pancreatic cancer. You know, I don't know his dad's condition, but that is a, you know, that's a brutal thing for somebody to witness. It's not an easy thing to, watch someone suffer with that kind of cancer. So genuinely feel for him. That's a horrible thing to go through. So there's that, just to sort of like lead with a little bit of humanity here. It's a horrible, difficult thing.
Because of that, I haven't been live and I haven't made a lot of videos. I apologize for that. Hopefully I'll be back as soon as possible. That being said, we had something insane happen today, and I was able to break away a little bit earlier, and I wanted to make a video about it and talk about the obvious and inevitable nature of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. This happened a few hours ago, and it was probably one of the most gruesome and graphic, and this is coming from somebody who grew up on LiveLeak, videos I've ever seen. The first time I saw a video, I thought it was AI generated. The guy gets shot in the neck and blood is spurting out. I didn't even know it could do that. And it was absolutely fucking horrifying to see something like that happen in front of a massive audience of people. Now, if you don't know who Charlie Kirk is, Charlie Kirk has been a pretty noteworthy, you know, like controversial guy. He's a conservative. He goes to a lot of college campuses, does live debates. This is a pretty popular format nowadays, and Charlie Kirk has been popularizing it and utilizing it.
I don't think it's going to be a popular format anymore. I think we're probably done in the short term with campus events
now for many years, and he was even featured in South Park recently because of it. Charlie Kirk definitely is not a super radical right-wing person, but I would say that he's more of the moderate to, you know, kind of extreme right-wing. Very, very, I would say, lukewarm, though, in my opinion, at least especially.
I mean, listen, compared to Nazis, like actual Nazis, I guess you could say he was moderate, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think the label moderate applies. Not that that matters in this context. If he were less moderate, you know, it would be justified or something, but yeah.
And this is where we're going.
Which is not what I'm saying, to be clear. Sauce, thank you so much for the primer.
Especially compared to now. And what I think is going to happen now, because obviously these shootings like this don't really happen inside of a vacuum, and they never do, they never have. And I think that the situation that we have right now is that there is a tremendous amount of political violence that is advocated for, promoted, and allowed to exist on social media that has turned up the temperature in all political conversations, all social conversations, and all discourse on the internet in general, to a point where it's almost unrecoverable.
I mean, I agree, but I do think social media platforms have not properly taken on the responsibility of addressing this, you know. I agree, but don't we end up in the same conversation, in the same debate that was going down in 2020? I thought the whole idea was that people like Asmongold idolized Elon Musk and loved the fact that he came to Twitter, and, you know, all of a sudden now it's just, you can say just kind of whatever the fuck you want on Twitter. If he's taking the position that social media platforms aren't doing enough, is he not kind of arriving at a justification for kind of stricter TOS that we saw back in like 2021 and 2020? I thought Twitter, like suppressing COVID denialism and anti-vaccine stuff, I thought that stuff was like Orwellian and, you know, an assault on our First Amendment rights. But also they should do more to tamp down extremist rhetoric. Is that what we're talking about here?
You have people that are out there all the time advocating for violence, advocating for people to get killed. Somebody needs to take care of this guy. Somebody needs to deal with this. I wish he were dead. Won't somebody do it? The 8647, all of the crypto messaging and all of the doxing, right? Why do you dox somebody? Why do you post a person's home address? It's to make other people that are insane, like the person who killed Charlie Kirk, it's to give them the ammunition they need to kill that person and to put that person's life in danger. That's why they're doing it. And so that's the reason why they want to find out the identities of ICE agents. That's the reason why they want to find out the identities of Tesla owners, like at the beginning of the year. It's so they can destroy their car and destroy their lives. And this isn't...
I mean, right away, we can kind of spot where the rhetoric is going here. You know, there's a us and there's a them. He seems to, right off the bat, be framing the current moment in the Charlie Kirk shooting as though it is the product of left-wing extremism in isolation. Like, is he going to talk about the 2 Minnesota lawmakers that were horrifically assassinated in their own homes? And there's all kinds of political extremist violence that just don't make mainstream news. You know, people are shot, people are killed, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't really make a wave. And this kind of violence happens. It is not exclusive to the left. People are delusional, or they have cultivated a social media. They've curated a social media feed that just kind of exclusively feeds them examples of left-wing violence. And I think it's obvious that there are so many people in the country that where it's not a bit, they're not being dishonest. They're not being intentionally dishonest. They genuinely believe that political violence is a uniquely left-wing phenomenon. They really believe that, and it is not true. It is not true. It is so far from the truth.
Necessarily a one-sided thing. I think that in the last 5 years,
okay, well, so hold on.
Of the year, it's so they can destroy their car and destroy their lives. And this isn't necessarily a one-sided thing. I think that in the last 5 years or so, especially since BLM, it's been a like 90% left-wing thing.
I mean, demonstrably false, you know. It's just so not true. No, this is great. This is what Grok had to say, right? I already read this from Grok before. Overall post 9/11 trend for broader reference. Brookings analysis shows right-wing extremists responsible for 130 killings compared to just 1 for left-wing. This pattern intensified in the last decade. It is literally the opposite of what he's suggesting. The 90-10, like you need to invert that and then even still like bump up the number. FBI and DHS reports emphasize racially motivated violent extremism and anti-government extremism as top threats, with left-wing, e.g. anarchist, activity noted but secondary. No recent data shows left-wing surpassing right-wing. Challenges in data. Not all violence is classified as terrorism, and ideologies can overlap. Sources like CSIS and ADL focus on ideology-driven acts intending to intimidate or coerce. In conclusion, right-wing politically extremist violence has been more common and more impactful over the last 10 years. I don't even think, like I said this before when I brought this up, but I don't even think that's particularly productive. In the context of the last 24 hours, I would rather not make this about, well, your side does it more. You know, there are times where I think that is appropriate to add to the discussion, but I would be more than happy to put all of that to the side for a moment and just recognize that a man was murdered, you know. Unfortunately, I feel like people like Asmongold and people that are pushing this completely false notion are inviting people to counter by pointing out that the disproportionality exists, but it's in the inverse. It's the opposite of what they think. I would way rather just not even delve into that. Like, we don't need to talk about that right now.
But that doesn't mean that the 10% right-wing people are right either. But I do think that now you're going to see a lot more right-wing people balancing out those scales. The fact is that you can take a knife to a gunfight all you want, and you can think that you're honorable, but you're going to end up being dead. And I think that's what right-wing people have done for a very long time. They've tried to speak above the political violence. They've tried to advocate above it and not try to stoop down to that level.
Well, I don't even know where to begin, guys. I don't even know where to begin with this one. I don't even know where to begin with this one. Find me a single elected Democrat in the entire country that did not, you know, if they spoke about the Charlie Kirk thing, that did not just unequivocally condemn it. You know, you can't. I would have known about it. I feel like if there was like an elected lawmaker that was wilding out about Charlie Kirk being shot. Everybody that I saw, from AOC to Mamdani to Newsom to Pritzker to Walz to every single elected Democrat that I saw was just unequivocal in their condemnation. The kind of normie lib content creators that I follow, all of them were unequivocally condemning it. I mean, we did see some insane, really fucking stupid rhetoric from the usual suspects of like black pill lefties, but we do not claim them. They are not ours. They're trying to infiltrate and destroy us. We hate them. Now compare that with elected Republicans in the way that they've responded to the various politically extreme violence coming from the right. You know, Donald Trump 3 days ago posted an AI like video meme of Nancy Pelosi or whatever making fun of Paul Pelosi. I don't know where he gets this idea that Republicans have tried to be above all that. What are you talking about? There were dozens of mainstream prominent Republican elected lawmakers that just outwardly joke about political violence that comes from right-wing extremists. I have no idea what this guy's information feed looks like. I don't know if this is somebody who just gets does he get all of his news from, you know, can you even see, is this following list public? Like, is he getting it from his own Reddit? Like, where is he? Where is he getting this? Yeah, I think that's a pretty wild thing to say.
But for a very long time, they've tried to speak above the political violence. They've tried to advocate above it and not try to stoop down to that level. But the issue is that a lot of these social media companies have expressed literally zero desire to even do the bare minimum of moderation. I think that two of the worst actors are Twitter or X and Reddit. Both of these platforms are full of a bunch of extremist nut jobs that not only should have their accounts banned, but they should probably be put in mental institutions. And I
don't know about the second part, but I do think that social media platforms are letting way too much. It's like the 4chanification of, you can find so much like extreme, violent, radical rhetoric on Reddit and particularly X. I mean, like, or Twitter. I mean, they're both bad. Like, honestly, they're both like horrible.
I think that now I find it to be.
Matthew Dowd got fired instantly from MSNBC for saying a supporter might have done it. That's the one guy I can think of that didn't condemn it unequivocally, and he was mega canceled. That's a good point. Yeah, there was swift. I mean, I think what he said was horrible in that moment. I understand why he got fired. That was such a horrible way to articulate whatever point he was making. Mr. Taxi with the tier 1 sub. Thank you.
kind of interesting taking a step back for a week or so and seeing how many people are coming around to the inevitable reality that this is the only path forward. There are so many people in society now that are just completely unhinged, under-medicated, and really just completely insane, that you can't have a person like that running wild out in society. They cause problems for themselves, not to mention everybody else around them. And I think that the society, we need to have an honest conversation about how to deal with these people in a way that, and I'll be real, I don't really care about the people that are crazy. Their well-being and the way that, you know, things are for them. Of course, obviously, I wouldn't want it to be bad, but it's certainly not important. What's really important is all the people who aren't.
Well, I don't know about that take. Like, we're going back to the dark ages with this kind of approach to how society deals with people that experience psychosis. It used to be that there was a religious interpretation of insanity. So if you were paranoid schizophrenic who lived in, you know, the 6th century, and you experienced psychosis, you know, they would literally chain you up in a fucking dungeon and beat the shit out of you, because the thought was that you were possessed by a demon. And so they thought if you caused physical pain to the body, the demon would want to leave your body. Just a really nightmarish situation for people that had psychosis back in the day. Can you imagine? You're having a psychotic break and then they fucking chain you in a dark dungeon and beat the shit out of you. I'm not saying that's what he's suggesting here. I agree with him that we need to do more to address mental health. I mean, the situation on the train last week is another example. I mean, the guy he was a diagnosed schizophrenic, and the system just is not equipped to properly address that stuff. Obviously, he did have a violent past. He had criminal charges and at least one conviction involving a violent crime. The guy who stabbed that Ukrainian woman. But the last violent incident he was involved in was back in 2021. So he had 4 years of, nonviolence. And so the system might look at that and think, oh, he's getting better, right? Like, and then he was arrested in January of this year for calling 911 too many times because he was having a psychotic break. And then the judge let him out without any cash bail or anything like that. But that had nothing to do with like a policy of no cash bail. Like every judge across the country would have done the same thing. They would have released him. But his family, his mom, as far as I read, she was basically pleading with local authorities to institutionalize him because she felt that he was dangerous. But the simple fact of the matter is that people with mental illnesses have rights. People that experience psychosis have rights. And hindsight is always 20/20. I think everybody wishes that this person had been institutionalized so that they didn't murder that fucking poor woman. But in hindsight, how was that judge supposed to know that he was going to do something like that? There's just no way to predict that. I don't quite care for his cavalier kind of rhetoric in terms of how we treat people with mental illness. I think those people are human beings and they suffer. These people, the overwhelming majority of schizophrenics are not violent. They pose no threat. They're more likely to be victims of violence themselves. And so I agree something needs to be done about that. But it seems like he's going down like just lock all the crazy people up and throw away the key. I don't agree with that. I think we need a much more robust system than the one that we have right now.
Aren't crazy, making sure that people that are not crazy, that are good actors, that are law-abiding citizens, are able to live a life of peace, a life of prosperity, and a life without fear of going on the subway, for example, as at the recent event as well. And I think that every single person in the world deserves to live in a place like that. And I don't want to see, America turn into a PvP server, and it sure seems like it is. And I think that in order to prevent that from happening,
that's an interesting way to put it, but not entirely wrong.
We need to have honest conversations about what do you do with people that get arrested 14 times, and it's not even a question, right? You put them in jail and you throw away the key, and you compel them to work, and that way you can make the money back from imprisoning them forever. That's the way that you solve that problem.
I mean, this guy, again, schizophrenia is one of the gnarliest mental disorders somebody can be diagnosed with. I mean, I went through a period when I was like, I was undiagnosed bipolar for most of my life. The vast majority of my life, I was undiagnosed bipolar. I didn't experience psychosis, but I had some gnarly ups and downs, and there was a lot of suffering. And then fortunately, I was able to be in a position where, you know, like my insurance is decent enough where I was able to get a diagnosis and get in, you know, I don't have to pay like thousands of dollars for medication. And but a lot of people who don't have the means, they don't have that kind of insurance, and they just don't have that kind of opportunity to get the kind of treatment that they need, especially schizophrenia. Like, can we just go through the diagnostic criteria for schizophrenia? It's fucking gnarly. But I remember being young, like 18, 19 years old, when the symptoms of my disorder started to manifest for the first time, and I knew something was wrong. I knew like something is not right. Like something is off. And so then I became obsessed with like, am I going to lose my mind? Am I going to go crazy? And so for a while there, and then when I looked into the schizophrenia, I thought, you know, like I was horrified with what I was reading about with schizophrenia. Just horrified that would be me one day. Schizophrenia is a mental disorder characterized by variously by hallucinations, typically hearing voices, delusions, disorganized thinking or behavior, and flat or inappropriate affect. Symptoms develop gradually and typically begin during young adulthood and rarely resolve. There is no objective diagnostic test. Diagnosis is based on observed behavior, a psychiatric history that includes the person's reported experiences and reports of others familiar with the person. For a formal diagnosis, the described symptoms need to have been present for at least 6 months, according to the DSM-5, or 1 month, according to the ICD-11. Many people with schizophrenia have other mental disorders, especially mood, anxiety, substance abuse disorders, as well as OCD. It affects about 0.3 to 0.7% of adults. It is just a gnarly condition to have, characterized by significant alterations in perception, thoughts, mood, and behavior. Symptoms are described in terms of positive, negative, and cognitive symptoms. The positive symptoms of schizophrenia are the same for any psychosis and sometimes referred to as psychotic symptoms. They may be present in any of the different psychoses, and are often transient, making early diagnosis of schizophrenia problematic. You know, it is brutal. It is, and I was reading about these symptoms and I was just horrified. I was like, is that going to be me? Am I going to lose my fucking mind? So, you know, what happened to that woman was a horrible, horrible, horrible tragedy. I saw that video too. It was fucking very violent, and just that poor woman, you know. But we are talking about a guy with a very serious very serious mental disorder. One of the most serious mental disorders that someone can have is schizophrenia. Obviously, like in hindsight, this person should have been institutionalized at some point. There should have been some kind of treatment, it's just, oftentimes it's so hard to treat these people. So I just, you know, I feel sadness for her, and I feel frustration with the system that it just is not built or equipped to identify the early warning signs, I guess. I don't even know. What do we even know about this guy? You know, but this guy was fucking crazy. This was a crazy person. I don't mean that pejoratively. This guy was a crazy person. Highly doubt that this person was motivated by animus or like racial hatred or whatever. He ran to the front of the bus too, and he was telling people like, I got that white girl. I got that white girl. She called me she called me the N-word. She called me the N-word. And people were quick to jump on that. These like right-wingers, like this right-wing media ecosystem that was trying to use this like horrific attack as some kind of like political cudgel. Look what this piece of shit did. He accused her of calling him that. He's a schizophrenic. Like, my dude. It is entirely possible that he fucking literally heard a voice in his head.
It's very simple, actually. But for some reason, the way that makes people feel has made them unwilling to look at this obvious truth. If you look in history, this is what we've always done in history, and it's because it works. And the problem is that now we have so much of the discourse that's dominated by emotional thinking, that's dominated by the most unstable, people the most virtue signal, the most, ridiculous performative empathy possible, and that's defining a huge political voice in the country. This has become a tremendous detriment to everyone. And I think that with people like the shooter that probably shot Charlie Kirk, with that guy in the subway that stabbed that Ukrainian woman, or with that trans shooter that shot up the school, one thing that's
I mean, there's so many other mass shooters. Wasn't the point, the point in the conversation, I just want to double check and see, like, the person who was debating Charlie Kirk about gun violence, they brought up the amount of trans people that are responsible for mass shootings in the last 10 years. And I think he said the number was 5. I just, when you single in on just one particular type of violence and just ignore everything else, I feel like all this does is just obfuscate, pisses people off, gives people the complete wrong impression of like what's going on.
Common among all of them is that these people, in almost all cases, were verifiably nuts beforehand, and nothing ever was done about it. And until we can stomach the idea of solving problems like that before they happen, we're going to keep having problems. And I think that with Charlie Kirk, it's very obvious that the amount of, political violence and advocating for political violence that's happening on the internet has turned up the temperature and created an environment and a culture where this type of behavior is normal. And not only is it normal, but it's actually encouraged. And the problem is that now people are acting on it. And you're starting to see this happen, and I think it's going to continue getting worse. I don't think Charlie Kirk is going to be the last one, but I think that we will look at Charlie Kirk's death and see it as a turning point in this topic. And what I'm really trying to get at here with this entire
I don't think he's wrong about all that. Mr. Flibbles, thank you.
Higher point is that right now we are at a extremely pivotal moment, and I think that what's going to end up happening is that right-wing people are not going to continue to turn the other cheek.
How do you explain this? I don't know how to explain this. I feel like you really have to go out of your way and make an effort to avoid confronting the reality that plenty of extremely prominent Republicans, including the president, do anything but turn the other cheek. They actively fan the flames of this stuff. I don't know how you could avoid confronting that reality after everything we've seen from people like Donald Trump, from his kids, people like Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, basically all right-wing influencers. You know, there's a spectrum of bad across that landscape, but it's all over, like all over Republican politics, in the media and in elected government, all over. Joke about violence, excuse violence in some contexts, and condemn it in other contexts. Do I even need to point out the fact that Donald Trump pardoned literally hundreds of people who violently assaulted police officers because they wanted to stop the peaceful transfer of power? Like, what is this turning the other cheek? What are we even talking about? Dice Man with $20. Too much empathy has its consequences too, Hutch. As someone who has had to deal with a number of severely mentally ill people in my store, I'm tired of these people roaming the streets. Something needs to change. I mean, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with the idea that people deserve to feel safe in their communities. I don't disagree that our current system is not dealing with mental illness efficiently. I don't disagree with that. I think most people agree. But I reject this prescription. Just like, let's just, I don't know. I don't know what he's proposing. You know, let's establish like a profile, like a criminal profile, and lock people up without proper, due process. Like, what crime? Like, institutionalizing someone who is having a psychotic break is not. It's a high threshold to deprive someone of their liberty, by placing them in an institution involuntarily. And it should be that way because people with mental illness have rights. I saw people saying we should, there was somebody on CNN that was like literally saying that we should put all schizophrenic people in jail. It's like, what are we That can't be the answer.
They're not going to continue to just, oh, well, you know, this is just a crazy left-wing radical. I think you're probably going to see right-wing people doing the same thing to left-wing people. And honestly,
it's already happening, bro. It's already happening. It's not that we're going to start seeing it happening. We're going to see it happen more than it's already happening now.
While I don't think this is a good thing, I certainly don't really feel that sorry for them, because a lot of left-wing people have no problem advocating for violence, or at least using coded language in order to advocate for violence.
I mean, I think this is a very, very, very online take. You know, he's generalizing way too much here. He's taking these extreme examples of people on Reddit and Twitch and Twitter, and I agree with him. I agree. There are so many, it's getting worse. Like, there is a growing left-wing online movement that is becoming more and more radical, and the thought leaders and prominent creators in that space are engaging in behavior that I think is disgusting. Like, we've been talking about that a lot on this stream. You can't accuse me of sweeping for those people. That's been my whole fucking priority for the last like 2 months. I agree with him that that problem exists, but that's one part of this conversation. That is only one side of this conversation. There's so many other sides to unpack to why this violence is becoming more and more common. I mean, look at the rhetoric that we're seeing from prominent right-wingers as a result of Charlie Kirk. Like, these people are like literally calling for war, you know? My name is Nerf. Thank you so much for 12 months. Appreciate it.
Fact is that there's a certain level of intellectual dishonesty that goes on in situations like this, where that's
a bit ironic.
It's considered, oh, well, you know, this isn't actually what they meant, and no, this is actually some others. No, it is. It's exactly what they mean. They're trying to advocate for killing people that they disagree with. That's what's happening, and there's no talking around it. And to the extent that you try to, you're insulting the intelligence of anyone that you're speaking to. And I think that now you're going to start seeing a lot of right-wing people end up doing this to left-wing people now.
That ship has sailed a long time ago, brother.
Even more, because it's very clear that these social media platforms are not going to moderate this behavior. The FBI, for whatever reason, just refuses to deal with or have any degree of accountability for dealing with these obvious terrorists that are in the country. And because of that, I think you're going to start seeing an uptick of violence from right-wing people as well. And this is going to be, in my opinion, I don't really think the word is justified, because it's not justified, but the word is expected. I think it's going to be expected. The fact is that, you know, again, you bring a knife to a gunfight, you're going to lose. And don't be surprised when you keep bringing guns to gunfights and then somebody else decides to start shooting back. I think that's what's going to happen. And I think this is a degradation of society as a whole. And ultimately, the real burden of responsibility here doesn't really fall on influencers. And I don't think that it falls even on the commenters themselves. I think it falls primarily on the government. The fact is that the government, there are already laws that permit, you know, explicit calls to violence. There's already laws that permit the types of stalking and doxing that people engage in online. And one of the big things that is a misconception is that people like me want new laws. We want any form of extra censorship at all. I certainly don't want that, and I don't know anybody else that does either. But
I mean, you do, right? But I feel like you don't want to say that. Like, some censorship is good. Obviously, some censorship is good. Like, it's good that social media platforms don't allow explicit incitement to violence. That's censorship. That's good censorship. Censorship is not always bad. You know, a private company, government censoring you, there should be massive limitations on that. If you ask me, a fucking American, the government should be very limited in how they can censor your speech, with reasonable exceptions, like incitement. But similarly, social media companies should crack down more on this shit. But it is censorship. Just call it what it is. But I feel like he doesn't want to say that, because now it's like, okay, we're going back to 2020, 2021. You know, that was a whole debate, was about how social media went too far in cracking down on election denialism and COVID stuff. And, you know, I do think there were instances where social media companies did go too far, but, you know, now we have this massive swing in the other direction. where, you know, Elon comes along and so Twitter basically turns into fucking 4chan, right?
What we do want is we want the existing laws to be applied and to be enforced in an accurate and a fair way, which is clearly not what's happening. And really the government not doing that and giving this asymmetrical, in my opinion, advantage to left-wing people to fully and with complete freedom practice genuine terrorism on a daily basis, and then, you know, congratulate each other about how moral and how good they are for doing it because something bad that happened in Palestine or something bad that Donald Trump did 3 years ago. This is just simply a response.
I mean, Trump pardoned those violent criminals less than a year ago. It was like 7 months ago, but
this is what's going to happen. And so, and I think that that's probably what it's going to take for these left-wing people to realize what a bad idea what they've been doing is. Because until it starts happening to them, until they start having people that are their friends or, you know, their, you know, like icons that they look up to, the same way people looked up to Charlie Kirk, you know, until they start seeing those people get killed, I don't think it's really going to be real for them. And unfortunately, I think that's the path that we're headed down because of the government and social media companies and every other seemingly governmental apparatus that has just completely hand-waved this problem and ignored it entirely. So the death of Charlie,
I just feel like we're conflating so many different things all at once here. You know, he's talking about like left-wing extremist violence, but he's also talking about like crazy people with severe mental illness, and it's all just kind of being thrown in a big like they, you know, look at this thing that they're doing. And I guess he's just calling that like left-wing, like the left wing.
Kirk and the assassination of him should not come as a surprise to anyone. This should be something that everybody could have expected. All you had to do is read Twitter for an hour and you could have told me this would have happened, of course. Same with Reddit. And until that core problem is addressed, you will continue to see a rapid decline in any type of social discourse. And I'm actually kind of afraid to see what's going to happen next, because I think it's just going to continue getting worse, and I don't see the reason for it to stop. And so anyway, I wanted to make this video because it's obviously a topic that, you know, I've been talking about this a lot for the past few years now, and I was laughed at a lot, and people were telling me it wasn't that big of a deal, and oh, they were joking. Well, I saw the video. That wasn't a joke. And the reality is that those jokes and everything create a culture and an environment where the actual actions are more permissible. And you also have people that are the ones telling me, quote, jokes that are talking around just, you know, directly, you know, saying that this is a bad thing and it shouldn't be tolerated for any reason. You have, I don't want to go through a bunch of different names, but anybody, this is the way I look at it, I'm just going to make a categorical judgment here, is that any content creator or anybody like this who has been advocating for violence against a person in an extrajudicial way, I'm not talking about trying people who they disagree with for treason. This is advocating for the judicial process to be used against people they disagree with. I think that's fine, but when
oh my god. I mean, you tell me what's worse. You tell me what's worse. Some rando on Twitter, even a content creator, like, let's say, you tell me what's worse. A content creator on Twitter making like tacitly endorsing violence, which again, I agree with him. That is happening a lot. I don't discriminate based on fucking ideology though. I don't have like a filter where I only see that kind of shit being bad from one angle. But if I just want to throw him a bone and just, if we want to just talk about left-wing extremism and compartmentalize in that way, I'm fucking perfectly fine having that conversation. I've been ringing that alarm bell myself. But you tell me what's worse. Someone like Hassan posting the picture of the fucking makeshift gun above the tweet for Tom Cotton or whatever, or the president of the United States, his administration announcing that they're looking into charging Barack Obama with treason. Like, what's worse? You tell me what's worse. He's saying, oh, well, you're going through like a legal process, so that's fine. Obviously, I think Donald Trump accusing Barack Obama of fucking treason is worse. Kind of a ridiculous thing to suggest that, well, that's not that bad because, you know, that's a formal legal process. It's like, okay. I just want to rewind that a little bit.
Judgment here is that any content creator or anybody like this who has been advocating for violence against a person in an extrajudicial way. I'm not talking about trying people who they disagree with for treason. This is advocating for the judicial process to be used against people they disagree with. I think that's fine. But whenever you have people that are saying things like 8647 or anybody who's advocating for any form of extrajudicial justice, extrajudicial justice, and basically vigilante justice on people who they disagree with politically, you have to realize that all of those people, I think, have made themselves acceptable targets. And I think that there's a...
I mean, at this point, now you've just betrayed the very principle that you're, you know, claiming to be promoting. I feel like by saying that, now you've completely undermined your entire video. Am I wrong? Now you're saying it's acceptable to what? Do extrajudicial violence against someone who is making these like deranged threats? Curly with $25. As someone who was a fan of Asman, I've sat in the front row and watched his echo chamber be built. I really appreciate you taking the time to go through his views and deconstruct them. I've seen people fall down his viewpoint, push back as needed. Unfortunately, like, again, I would much rather spend the time that we have right now joining him in my disgust for what we all witnessed yesterday. It's not a bit. I'm not forcing it. It's not performative. I am disgusted with what I saw yesterday. And I'm horrified. I'm not making that up. I don't have to make an effort to affirm that feeling that he's having and a lot of other young men are having probably today. The problem is like he forces this other discussion and it just feels like such a wasted opportunity because I and a lot of other people in this country I am perfectly willing to unite with people that whose politics I loathe. I would not hesitate for a moment, and I don't hesitate for a moment to join them in expressing like my disgust for what happened. And then, but because they respond to this horrible event with this rhetoric, like we have to address that. We can't not address that. This is really destructive rhetoric. To be clear, the people that I've been saying that we should distance ourselves from on the left are the type of people that are engaging in the kind of rhetoric that Asman is speaking to. And he's not wrong about that, but he is exclusively focusing on that part of the problem. And the problem is so much bigger than the glorification of violence that unfortunately we do see a lot of from young lefty types on social media. And we unfortunately see a lot of big left-wing creators that are in positions of influence that are encouraging that kind of rhetoric. And I do think that's a problem. And I do think we should eject those people from the party. Mike is a perfect example of that. Mike is a established stochastic terrorist. He has done it so many fucking times. When Mike from PA tells his audience that they have the right under international law to execute a citizen's arrest on me, I don't take that as a joke. To him, that might be funny. To me, it is not funny, especially in light of how much more normalized political violence is becoming. That's not a joke to me. I don't think that's funny. He is a literal stochastic terrorist. Makes me sick how they use it to spew this hatred. Yeah, I mean, I don't think this video helps at all. Unfortunately, I think Asman is making the problem a lot worse with this kind of stuff. He's super influential. He's one of the most influential people on YouTube, guys. This is a problem. This is a fucking problem. I hope he takes the time to have a public conversation with someone who's going to approach him in good faith and not... in an ideal world, he would have a conversation with someone who represents a different perspective and it doesn't devolve into like into just a name calling kind of, it doesn't go off the rails. Like that would be so ideal if he could have a conversation with someone who is like approaching in good faith and committed to having a discussion that is like grounded. And then somebody could explain to him that this is just, you know, the stuff that he's talking about is a problem. It is a problem, but ironically, he makes the larger problem worse by framing it in this way, because it's just an obfuscation of the truth. It's just not accurate what he is saying. He's the largest politics streamer on Twitch, and this rhetoric is purposeful. He knows what he's doing. I think he's pissed. If we could just put our empathy hat on for a minute, I think a lot of people are pissed. And I think that's an appropriate reaction to yesterday. Like, hopefully people can go kind of below that anger and identify what's underneath that anger. Anger is like it's always the secondary emotion. Anger exists so that it's like it's a biological evolutionary trait so that we can protect ourselves and survive. Anger has like a purpose, but it's always like there's always something underneath, and it's almost always like some kind of fear, you know. But people are angry, and so I think he's speaking from a position of like I think he's taking like the internet just makes everything so noisy. We're just bombarded with noise every fucking day, and we're not meant to interact with thousands of people every fucking day. You know, the way that creators do. Like that's new for human beings. Our minds are not meant for that kind of stimulus. And so we do what all humans do. Our minds do what all of our minds do, which is we try to compact really complex situations in a way that makes it easier for us to understand them. And I think, unfortunately, when that happens, you end up massively generalizing and missing the forest for the trees. And what emerges instead of reason and logic, what emerges is a narrative. That's what social media produces. It just produces these narratives, and then these narratives kind of take hold in the zeitgeist. And then all of a sudden we're, you know, the discourse was already fucked this last week because of the stabbing and just the way that people processed all that information. They turned this random stabbing from a paranoid schizophrenic into a culture war racial issue. It turned into this like political issue, and it's because that's how people package information. So they see it through these like really flawed lens, and then you get videos like this. I think he's just angry because he saw a man get murdered yesterday, and he's also seen just a lot of, like, quite frankly, a lot of just fucking deranged lefty lunatics get away with the most insane shit on Twitch, and so he's like connecting these dots and making it about that, and all before we know anything about the fucking shooter. Like, we still don't know. Like, is there any breaking news on this? We still don't fucking know who this person is. What is this? You know, like, what is this? Like this framing here.
Man, fight back! White 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 man.
What the fuck does this have to do with what? Wasn't the shooter white? Haven't we seen the, like, what are we, how did it turn into that? Like, what the fuck? We read about things like violent mobs, you know, from like hundreds of years ago. I mean, there's violent mobs that happen to, like, but like, I feel like it was a more common kind of thing. Like, mob violence was a lot more common, you know, just like 500 years ago or 2000 years ago. And then you see it in action, and it's like, oh, I kind of understand. You know, you read about these things like the Salem witch trials or whatever, and you think, like, man, how could people have become so irrational that they were like burning human beings alive? And then something like this happens, and you're like, oh, okay. Really, we haven't evolved all that much, you know. Like, human beings of today are still just as prone to mob violence as just 2,000 years ago.
But the reality is that they have created that environment themselves through their own actions, through their behavior, and through their own words. You reap what you sow. And I think that things are about to get a whole lot worse. So anyway, guys, I wanted to make this video and talk.
I just think this is so irresponsible. A video like this, you know, what is this video to him, right? You know, he's dealing with a horrible situation with his dad. with pancreatic cancer, which is just a nightmare to watch someone to go through, right? And he takes he takes what, 15 minutes out of his day to go home and record a video real quick and put it up on the internet. You know, what's it to him? 25 minutes of labor, including like uploading it and putting a description in there or whatever, and then he's like back at the hospital dealing with the dad stuff. And but in doing so, he just doesn't appear to have made any effort to present or talk about this issue in a way that is not going to make it worse. Just very, very, that's just the last kind of language that you want to hear from someone like him, right? Like how many videos, this was posted less than 24 hours ago and it has nearly 3 million views. There's a lot of people right now that are just really making this fucking problem so much worse right now.